Today we are ready for Chapter 3 and the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Chapter 3, and the title is Heartbreak for Tom. Tom thought that the lunch recess would never come. The air in the classroom was utterly dead. Not a breath was stirring. It was the sleepiest of sleepy days. It took all of Tom's strength just to stay awake. His hand wandered into his pocket and he pulled out the tiny matchbox which held the tick he had traded his tooth for. Tom released the creature and watched it crawl along the long, flat desk. Joe Harper, Tom's best friend, sat next to him. Joe, too, was grateful for the diversion of a tick on such a dull Monday. Tom poked at the tick with a pin, and the creature changed its direction at every poke. Joe took a pin out of his lapel and joined in the sport. Your lapel would be the parts of fabric on maybe a suit jacket that's folded back here. And he had a pin stuck in his lapel for some reason. He doesn't tell us why. In a few minutes, Tom complained that they were interfering with each other, and neither was getting the fullest benefit of the tick. So he put Joe's slate on the desk and drew a line down the middle. One side was to be Tom's territory, and the other side would be Joe's. The poor tick scurried from one tormentor to the other, and the two boys bent their heads over the slate, giving all their attention to the game. It didn't take long before they started to argue, and Tom reached over into Joe's territory and poked the tick with his pin. "Tom, you let him alone," said Joe. "Look here, Joe Harper, just whose tick is it anyway?" answered Tom back. The boys were so involved in their game that they didn't notice the hush that had come over the classroom. They didn't realize that Mr. Dobbins had tiptoed toward them and was now standing and watching their game. Before they knew it, they felt the harsh smacks of hickory twigs on their shoulders, and the punishment ended their game. He got up behind them without them knowing it. That poor tick. When school was let out for lunch, Becky was waiting for Tom. The two walked off together to a secret place in the yard behind the school. For a while, Tom drew on his slate as Becky, obviously impressed, watched him in silence. And after some time, Tom looked up and he asked, "Were you ever engaged, Becky?" "I don't know," she answered. "What's it like to be engaged?" "I don't know." "Well," said Tom, "you just tell a boy that you won't love anyone but him. And then you kiss. Anybody can do it." At first, Becky hesitated, but Tom explained over and over again the importance of the kiss and the pledge of undying love. When Becky finally agreed, Tom kissed her. Then he relaxed and told her of the rest of the agreement. "Oh, just a little peck on the cheek. We'll always walk to school together, and at parties you choose me and I choose you. We'll always be together when nobody is looking, that is. It's so nice. I never heard of being engaged before," whispered Becky with a sigh. "Oh, it's a lot of fun," said Tom. "Why, me and Amy Lawrence..." Becky's wide eyes filled with tears, and Tom realized he had made a terrible mistake. He tried to comfort Becky and explain that he had no feelings for Amy anymore, but Becky would hear none of it. She turned her face to the wall and went on crying. Tom got up and walked around the schoolyard for a while, and then he returned to Becky's side and once again told her that she was his only love. But Becky kept on crying. So Tom reached into his pocket for his most important treasure, a brass doorknob. He passed it to Becky and said, "Please, Becky, won't you take it?" Girls, isn't that what we all want? A brass doorknob. Becky threw the doorknob on the ground. Tom got up and stomped out of the schoolyard. He headed for the hills outside of town and didn't return to school at all that afternoon. Becky soon regretted her actions and began looking for Tom everywhere. She called his name over and over, but there was no answer. She had no companions or friends, but silence and loneliness, as she sat down to cry again. As the rest of the students filed back into the school, Becky looked hopefully for some sign of Tom, But it was too late. Her heart was broken, and she was sure she had lost him forever. Oh my. The end of chapter 3. Next time we'll be reading chapter 4.